Welcome to the Racing Report with Rob Peters. I am your host, Rob Peters, and this is the third episode of our little show that we're doing here today. On today's episode, we're going to be talking all things Talladega, the NASCAR world, as well as some pretty big lawsuits going on in that world as well. And then as well, we're going to be talking about an IndyCar street race. A brand new IndyCar street race is coming. We talked about it last week, and now it's officially here. And then we're also going to be talking about some of a new point system in the world of supercars. So before we get started, remember, I am on social media. You can follow me. It's at rpeeters33. That's RPEETERS 33. You can find me on X, Twitter, whatever, and Instagram as well. So let's go ahead and jump right on into the news of the week, because this week we're taking a look first at the Formula One news. The promoter of the United States Grand Prix, Bobby Epstein, has said that he's seen an increase in ticket sales since apparently Max Verstappen stopped winning. This is very interesting. He says, this is his quote, I'll read for you here for a minute. I think it would have been our weakest year in 4 since the pandemic, he explained. Our ticket sales really took off when Max stopped winning and it got more competitive. So I give a lot of credit to our fan base and audience. They're paying attention, and I think it's exciting to see the season shape up the way it is. So some interesting comments there. Definitely we've seen the F1 points battle get a little bit tighter, much more tighter as the races go on, the season goes on, and it looks like now, boy, we're in for a fun little points championship, and everybody at the Circuit of the Americas really wants to see it. So the next piece of Formula One news we're going to talk about here is former F1 team principal Otmar Szafnauer has apparently said in interviews with a couple of different media entities that he was planning on making Alpine into a top 3 Formula One team until he was fired at the 2023 Belgian Grand Prix. He's also gone on record as calling the current situation at Alpine a disaster. So definitely some very interesting news going on there in the Formula One world. Now let's take a look at the world of IndyCar, because this is the biggest thing that we're going to be talking about today, is the IndyCar street race. So IndyCar's got another street race that they've just announced, and it's going to be called the Grand Prix of Arlington. We talked about this a little bit last week, and basically what this is going to do is it's going to race around the Cowboy Stadium, AT&T Stadium, and the Texas Rangers in the MLB, the baseball stadium of Globe Life Park. So that's where this race is going to be around, and it's actually going to be pretty long. It's going to be 2.73 miles, which is a very long distance for a street course, for a street race, for sure. And we've kind of gotten a little bit of details. We've seen now what the track is actually going to look like, and then we've also know when it's going to take place. It's going to take place sometime in March of 2026. So again, not next year, but in 2 years' time is when this is going to happen. And I think, there's a lot of IndyCar fans that are kind of skeptical, but also excited. We've been here before with street races being announced and then ultimately not coming to fruition, especially when they're announced this far out of their planned running. So definitely something interesting. But the course does look cool. I'll give it that. As much as I personally wish that they were still at Texas Motor Speedway, I'll give them credit for trying something new, but I do just hope that it lasts more than 3 seasons. Now we'll move on into Supercars news, because this is probably the biggest radical change, and this comes on the weekend of Bathurst. If you're not watching the Bathurst 1000 this weekend, boy, I highly recommend it. But we are seriously looking at, for the second time, basically, in major motorsports, a playoff system has been implemented. So we've got NASCAR's playoff system, but now Supercars down in Australia is implementing their own playoff system. But they're not calling it the playoffs. They're calling it the finals. And basically what they're going to do is they're going to break the championship up into 3 different segments, basically. And so in the first round, you're going to have what's called the Sprint Cup, and that's going to be all of the, the typical race weekends, the 3 to 4 races per weekend that, if you're familiar with Supercars, you're familiar with how that works. So that's not really going to change. But then they're going to change after those 8 rounds are up. And now keep in mind, so each round, there might be 8 rounds, but we're still talking about multiple races per round in Supercars. So what we're looking at here is you might have 3 to 4 races in one round, and that's a bunch of different points that you can score in that round. And so when we talk about this, how they're breaking up the schedule, keep that in mind, because when we go after the Sprint Cup is done, then they're going to go right into the Enduros. And there's only going to be 2 endurance races this year for Supercars. And one of them is going to be at the Bend, which is a brand new thing that they're now making. It's a new race, a new endurance race at the Bend. But then as well, it's also going to have the Bathurst 1000. And how that's going to take is this is how they're going to determine who's in the finals, because the finals is the third leg of the championship. So if you win, or basically win the Sprint Cup, you're the top point scorer in the Sprint Cup, you get an automatic berth into the finals. And then if you score the most points at the Bend and Bathurst, then you also get an automatic berth into the finals. But then here's where it comes. Then the next 8 drivers, the next top 8 drivers in the points are locked in then to the finals as well. And so the finals is going to be comprised of 3 rounds, and that's going to be the Gold Coast, Sandown, and then Adelaide. And so at Adelaide, so each round, you're going to have about 3 races per round, give or take. And after those 3 races, the bottom 3 drivers are going to be dropped, kind of similar to how NASCAR works it. But instead, it's going to be after each round. So after the Gold Coast round, 3 drivers will be dropped. After the Sandown round, 3 drivers will be dropped, leaving 4 drivers to compete in the Adelaide Grand Final over the course of those 3 races. So if you're kind of confused still, I understand. That playoffs in motorsports is definitely a controversial subject, but it's here, and that's how it's going to work. So I've tried to kind of explain it that way. All right, now we'll move on into some NASCAR news, because this is probably the biggest. This is the biggest thing. This is the craziest thing in the world of NASCAR that's going on right now, and that's a lawsuit. A lawsuit has been filed against NASCAR by 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. Now, we didn't talk about this last week, mainly because it just broke when I was recording, and I did not have nearly enough time to actually break down what was going on. But now that we know what's going on, here's what's happening. So we've got those 2 teams, 2311 and Front Row Motorsports, have hired in a lawyer, a very famous lawyer. If you're familiar with the name Jeffrey Kessler, you know why he's a very famous lawyer in the sports world. So we've got him coming in, and he is now representing those 2 teams in this litigation. And let me tell you, a lot of moving parts. By the time you watch this, who knows how much of this could be outdated. I don't, it's a lot of moving parts. A lot of things are moving fast, maybe faster than I expected, but even then, we're looking at something big. So Richard Childress, who's not involved in this lawsuit, mind you, but he confirmed to Bob Pockrass that the teams were basically handed the over 180-page document of the new charter agreement about 6:30 in the evening, and then they were given a deadline of midnight to sign it, or else they would risk having their charters revoked. I'm serious about this. They would risk having their charters revoked, and that's what Richard Childress confirmed to Bob Pockrass. And this is something that we already knew based on the court documents that were filed in this lawsuit. So now what you're saying is NASCAR is trying to stop the preliminary injunction that 2311 and FRM are trying to get the courts to allow them to keep racing with their charters. And NASCAR is now arguing that they'll just continue racing as open teams, and this injunction doesn't mean anything. Denny Hamlin has gone on his podcast and given very kind of detailed explanations for all of the grievances that he had with the new charter agreement, and they're pretty extensive. This definitely seems like NASCAR, and this is an antitrust lawsuit, by the way. If I haven't mentioned that yet, this is an antitrust lawsuit. So they're being sued essentially for anti-competitive behavior in the automobile world. And so I guess according to some owners who spoke on the condition of anonymity, they echoed a lot of what Denny Hamlin and Bob Jenkins, who's the owner of Front Row Motorsports, had to say about this lawsuit. So definitely some interesting moving parts going on in the world of NASCAR that we'll have to monitor throughout the rest of the show. Or actually, not just the rest of the show, but in fact, the rest of the year, probably, until this gets solved. I've heard, possible court dates being set in November, maybe. We'll have to see. I'm not entirely sure about that yet, but interesting news. And then the final piece of NASCAR news here. This is kind of cool. This is some sponsorship news. Shane Van Gisbergen is getting full sponsorship from WeatherTech to compete the NASCAR Cup Series next year for Trackhouse Racing. And then they'll also sponsor Connor Zilisch when he races full-time for Junior Motorsports in the Xfinity Series next year. So some good sponsorship news there, but also some big lawsuit news. So that's really it for kind of the news going on in the world of racing. But there was some late-breaking news that I should mention before I move on. The Indy Next champion, last year's Indy Next champion, Louis Foster, has signed a deal to race full-time for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing in IndyCar next year. So that's big news there. Another Indy Next graduate getting to move up into the big IndyCar series. So that's good. And he earned it. I tell you what, if you watched him in Indy Next last year, he earned that right to be out in the IndyCar series. So, all right, we have to take a break. We have to take a real quick break. But when we come back, we're going to discuss everything that went down in the Talladega weekend in NASCAR. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We're going to chat all things NASCAR coming up on the Racing Report with Rob Peters. Welcome back to the Racing Report with Rob Peters. I'm Rob Peters. Today we're going to be talking about everything in the world of NASCAR when it comes to the Talladega weekend. Because believe me, I love the Talladega weekend, and I think I speak for most NASCAR fans when I say it's probably the most look forward to weekend on the schedule anytime it comes around. Just because it's so unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. The racing is always thrilling and fantastic. Of course, some people might not be too keen on agreeing with that anymore, because apparently during the race there were moments where drivers were fuel saving, and that's normal. That happens in the world of racing. You fuel save in order to get to the end of your stint or even to the end of the race. And at that time, drivers were driving 4 wide all around the track, 4 wide. And to me, I thought that was cool. Even though they were, yes, fuel saving, I still thought that was pretty cool. Some people have not really been too keen on all of that, but I think it's a product of the way that the modern day super speedway racing is. You have to make it to the end. And as I talked about last week, you really, really need to stage race. And we saw how important that stage racing really was this weekend when it came to guys getting eliminated from the race, not necessarily from the playoffs, but from their race. We're talking about big things there. So let's talk about the Cup Series race. We'll start off with the Cup Series race. We'll talk about this. So Ricky Stenhouse Jr. scored his 4th career Cup Series win on Sunday. It was a photo finish over Brad Keselowski. And to be honest with you, I had no real complaints. They didn't wad it up on the last lap like I thought they were going to. So I got to give the drivers credit on that. You really have to, because usually the drivers, they like to wad it up on the last lap. But overall, I think in terms of the quality of racing and looking at the points, I think it was a really interesting day because you had guys, Chris Buescher, a non-playoff driver, won the first stage and took away 10 bonus points from someone who might have used it. But then Austin Cindric came in and won stage 2. Now, what's interesting about that is I really thought that Austin Cindric winning a stage 2 was going to benefit him and really play into his favor if he was caught up in a wreck. And it turned out he was caught up in a wreck because Todd Gilliland was slow on the racetrack, and then you just had a chain reaction of events, and Austin Cindric ended up getting turned, and his day was done. Now, what's interesting about that is even though he won stage 2, he still is now below the cut line. He's still below the cut line in the Cup Series. And that's going to be very interesting to watch coming up this weekend at the Roval, because Austin Cindric traditionally is a pretty good, road course driver. But since the next-gen car has come out, he's kind of struggled at it, to be honest with you. So it'll be very interesting to see how he performs there. But he does have that 10 extra bonus points that maybe could play into his favor, depending on how the points shake out when we finish the race at the Roval. I'll be interested to see. I'll be very interested to see how it all plays out with Austin Cindric for sure. But then, you had that massive 28-car crash that we're just talking about. That's what took out Austin Cindric. It basically triggered the largest, it took out the most amount of NASCAR cars in the history of NASCAR, apparently, modern day. 28 cars involved in the big one. Biggest big one of all time, apparently. And as a result of that, you had a lot of playoff drivers get eliminated as a result. And then you had another spoiler in Ricky Stenhouse Jr. winning the race, because we talked about last week, Ross Chastain spoiled the playoffs, and now you have Stenhouse spoiling the playoffs. And well, even if he didn't, even if Brad had won the race, he would have spoiled the playoffs because he was eliminated 2 weeks ago. So very interesting things going on there. But the four guys that are at risk of being eliminated at the Roval are Joey Logano, Daniel Suarez, Austin Cindric, and Chase Briscoe. All of those guys are facing elimination, and that's why I said it was very interesting that that Austin Cindric is below the cut line despite winning Stage 2. You would have thought that Stage 2 win would have propelled him and would have helped him, and maybe it will, depending on how the other playoff drivers do on Sunday. We'll have to see as the Roval comes in, but you never know. Now let's move on into the Xfinity Series, because I think the Xfinity Series has really been shaken up with this. Sammy Smith won Saturday's Xfinity Series race, and I don't think anybody had that on their bingo cards. I think maybe you bet on him, but that was probably about as much as you did, right? But yeah, Sammy Smith wins the Xfinity Series race. Now he's locked into the round of 8. So he doesn't have to worry at all about the upcoming race at the Roval. No matter what happens, it's not a big deal. Whereas everybody else in the Xfinity Series is probably going to be concerned. You've got Cole Custer and Austin Hill. They're tied for P2 in the points. And what's interesting is they're tied for P2, and both of them had problems on Saturday in the Xfinity Series race. Austin Hill got wrecked, and that's how things can change. Even though they're still tied for P2, they had decent leads going into the race. And now even look at Justin Allgaier. Justin Allgaier is below the cut line in P9 after that race. Man, I don't know. I don't know what Justin Allgaier is going to do. If I'm Justin Allgaier, I'm sweating bullets going into the Roval. He's got to make sure that he practices that Roval, and it's a new Roval. Keep that in mind. It's a new Roval this year. We'll talk about that here after we come back from our next break. But it's a new Roval, so anything can happen. And then in the Truck Series, Grant Enfinger locked himself into the Championship 4 with his win at Talladega. Now, this was huge because Grant Enfinger won Stage 2, and Matt Mills won Stage 1, actually, which was very good. He got recently re-signed for Nice Motorsports. But Grant Enfinger wins Stage 2, and now he is looking good for Phoenix. He's done. He's locked into Phoenix. He doesn't have to worry about anything. He got CR7's first ever career win in the Truck Series, which was huge for that team. But then you look at the playoff cut line below the Championship 4. You've got Nick Sanchez dropped 3 spots in the playoffs. Now he's P7. Tyler Ankrum dropped 2 spots down to P8. And then, so those guys both tumbled in points, and we're looking at, maybe a spicy Truck Series Championship 4. But the last thing I wanted to talk about before we move on here was the controversy that's coming around with NASCAR right now. And at the end of the Cup race, you had the drivers, you had that big 28-car wreck, right? We're talking about that big 28-car wreck. And when, once again, just like last week, you had drivers that only had 4 flat tires, or had minimal damage but flat tires and couldn't make it around. And you had that NASCAR threw a red flag and couldn't, and then they threw the red flag and then threw the yellow after the red flag was done, while there were still cars parked on the apron of turn 3 that were just asking for a push. And once again, this is not a good look for NASCAR. This is something that I really think that they need to fix, because this DVP could and very well might affect the championship at this rate. And I'm saying that at the end of all of this instead of just during the NASCAR portion, because this applies to the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series as well. This DVP problem is not good, and it's going to cost somebody a championship. In the Cup Series, it's a little bit different because the next-gen car, the 4 flat tires, it makes it impossible to go. But with the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series, you still could have a guy that has minor damage be called out of the race because of some kind of miscommunication like this. And that's what I'm really worried about. And that's what, especially with the Cup Series, you need to work on this. NASCAR needs to fix this. And I don't know if they're going to. They've repeatedly said that they're not going to fix the rule until the off season. So we'll just have to wait and see what comes of this, and hopefully something like this doesn't impact the championship. Finally, we're going to take a look at the ARCA Series. Andres Perez de Lara was the ARCA Menard Series champion for 2024, and he is the first foreign-born champion in series history. But William Sawalich won the race at Toledo. Very interesting to know that Andres Perez de Lara did not win a single ARCA Menard Series race this year, but still won the championship. And that's because William Sawalich and Connor Zilich were not old enough or eligible to run the majority of those races, even though they won the races that they were entered in. Because they couldn't run the full season, they were not really points contenders. So that's it for the ARCA Series. That is also it for this segment. We're going to have to take a break one more time. This is our last break of the show. But when we come back, we're going to preview the week in ahead and take a look at all of the races that are coming up this weekend on the Racing Report. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Racing Report. We're going to take a look now at the races that are coming up this weekend, and there's a lot of them. It's a packed weekend of racing, and it's going to happen at all hours of the day, so make sure you get ready because, get your sleep in, enjoy that weekend, take PTO if you have to. It's going to be a packed weekend. Hopefully you didn't take PTO last week. I don't know. I work weekends. I hope you don't have to work weekends, but if you do, keep that in mind, because we've got, first of all, in the NASCAR world, we've got the Roval. We've got the Roval weekend. We're going to have the Xfinity Series race is going to race at 4 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time. That's Eastern Time on the CW. And going into it, like we said, this is a cutoff race, just like it's a cutoff race for the Cup Series. So the Cup Series race, that's going to be at 2 o'clock on NBC, on your local NBC affiliate. So all the NASCAR races this week are going to be over the air. So you don't even need cable to watch the NASCAR races this week. So good job for NASCAR making sure that these races are as accessible to fans as possible. And then we've also got the trucks. They're not in action this weekend, but they're going to come back in 2 weeks' time at Homestead Miami Speedway, and then that's going to be their second race of the round of 8. So some big possible championship implications coming up here at the Roval, depending on how these drivers drive it. Plus, like I said, it's a new Roval. It's an entirely new design. So NASCAR has tweaked a bit of the design. So you'll notice it. The front stretch and the back stretch chicanes are a little bit different. They're a little bit shortened, or a little bit, tried to make for a better passing zone. And then they've also altered the infield segment as well. They've changed the infield segment just a bit so that it is encourages a little bit more passing. You've kind of got a hairpin turn before you get back up on the banking in turn 1 of the Roval. Me personally, I don't really like it. I like the elevation changes of the Roval in that section that I'm talking about, in that infield section. I really liked the elevation changes. I hope that there's still some elevation changes there, but I'm not holding my breath. We'll find out when cars get on track. But then, as I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks on this show, is the Bathurst 1000. The Bathurst 1000 is coming up this weekend. In fact, as I'm recording this, they've already practiced and they're going to qualify, and it's the great race. It is the great race, and I highly recommend everybody in North America, if you have not ever watched the Bathurst 1000, I implore you, it is worth it. Like I said, it is about $7 a month, or basically it would just be a $7 payment if you're only watching Bathurst for Super View, and you can get that on YouTube, which means you can watch it on your phone, on your tablet, on your TV, literally anywhere that's connected to YouTube. You can watch the great race for $7. It's really not a bad. I understand not wanting to pay for watching things, but it's kind of worth it, and it's not super expensive as a pay-per-view thing. Plus, you also get all the practice and the qualifying, plus all of the support races. So we're talking about the Super 2, the V8 Utes. You ever watched V8 Utes? You like the truck series in NASCAR? Australia's got their own version of the truck series in the V8 Utes, but they race on the big mountain at Bathurst. And again, if you're not familiar with Bathurst, it is a 1,000-kilometer race up and down Mount Panorama, which is a mountain in Bathurst, Australia, New South Wales. It's one of the most thrilling races you'll ever watch, and I highly recommend if you get a chance to check it out. And then, so that race is going to start at 8:30 Eastern Time on Saturday night. Just keep that in mind. It's Sunday in Australia when they're running this, but at 8:30 Eastern Time, the lights are going to go out on the great race. So check your local listings for that. Check the local times for that. Supercars.com should help you. And then we've got the Petite Le Mans this weekend. If who doesn't love the Petite Le Mans? That's coming up on Saturday at noon. It's going to be streaming all the way through on Peacock. If you're a Peacock subscriber, you'll be able to watch it there. But then it'll also be airing on NBC from the hours from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time. And then it's going to pick up again on USA from 6 p.m. to the very end of the race, whenever that is. If it's 10:30, it's 10:30, or if it's earlier than that. Because remember, the Petite Le Mans is 10 hours or 1,000 miles, whichever comes first. So very, very interested, very excited for the Petite Le Mans. Very excited. It's the end of the IMSA season. We're going to crown an IMSA champion at the end of the Petite Le Mans. It's going to be a great race. I'm thrilled for it, and that's coming up on Saturday. So you got the Roval, you got Xfinity Series of the Roval, you got the Petite Le Mans on Saturday, and then you end your day. You get to end your day at Bathurst on Saturday. So a big race, big time of racing. And then if you're crazy like me and you just can't get enough racing, Super Formula is also in action this weekend. If you're never familiar with Japanese Super Formula, it used to be called Formula Nippon. Now it's called Super Formula. It's basically like Japanese IndyCar, and they're racing at Fuji. And Fuji used to hold Formula One Grand Prix for many years, and then it got the big upgrade. The Herman Tilke came in and kind of redesigned Fuji Speedway. But Super Formula is having two races this weekend at Fuji. The first race will be at 1:35 in the morning on Saturday. So Friday night, Saturday morning, 1:35 Eastern is going to be that race. That race is going to start then. And then the second race is going to start Sunday morning, Saturday night at 1:25 in the morning. So if you're crazy about that, then you can find that on motorsport.tv. I believe that is a paywall, however, but it is an option there if you're interested in watching it. So that is it for this week's episode of the Racing Report. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. Remember, if you like this show, tell your friends. Follow me on Twitter at RPEETERS33, RPeters33. Remember, tell your friends. Make sure that this show can grow thanks to you. So we appreciate all of your support. So thank you guys so much. My name is Rob Peters, and I will see you again next week on The Racing Report.